Thank you, both chairs, Chairman Rush and Chairman Lawn, for allowing us to be here today, and all committee members, and thank you for being co-sponsors. And I know there's a lot of support on this committee, and really just thank you for understanding the urgency of this issue. I think all of us would agree that it's not a good thing that we even have to be here today. But here we are, and we're here to do everything we can to fix this problem. So thank you for understanding that. My name is Michael Monetta. I'm a national director with the WolfPAC. We are the political arm of the Young Turks. Just to give you a little bit of background, the Young Turks are the largest online news show in the world right now currently. The founder of WolfPAC, Cenk, he didn't want to start WolfPAC. He was basically sick of telling his audience that there's just all this corruption happening in DC, but no way to fix it. So he spent 3 full years researching before he even started this organization. What are the solutions to fix this problem, of corruption in DC? And he came to 2 ultimate conclusions. One, we definitely need an amendment to fix this problem for the long run. It's the only thing that's going to go above this runaway Supreme Court. And 2, he found that most amendments to our Constitution have included a convention campaign. So he looked around and said, well, who's doing that? Didn't appear that anybody was doing that, calling for a convention for this specific issue of the amount of money pouring into our elections and fixing the corruption in DC. So he started the organization. Here we are, 5 or 6 years later. We have 5 state governments so far that have come on board. And we have to get to, as most of you are aware, 34 to actually trigger a convention on this specific issue. Now, the only question that may come up or has come up around this process, because I think most people are on board for the issue, it's bipartisan. Up to 96% of this country, citizens of this country, want something done about this issue. Everybody gets it. The question is, can you limit a convention to one subject? And we know you can, because right now Congress is constitutionally required to call a convention upon the application of 2/3 of the states. So right now that's 34 states. And since our founding, we've had over 400 applications submitted on all kinds of different issues. So that means Congress is clearly counting them on based on subject matter. So it's also just part of the Constitution that you need consensus to get an amendment. And Sam could talk a little bit more about that. He's one of our WolfPAC attorneys. So if you want any history of Article 5, he's definitely your guy there. And so, with that background, we feel that this is just what we must be doing right now. We think that the money corrupting our politics is the root cause of any issue that you care about, from the environment to fiscal responsibility, honestly. It's all rooted to how our politicians' campaigns are being funded. So we've got to fix it first, and we have to act with urgency. So my main ask would be to not just support this legislation, but make it a priority this year.
Thank you.
Here you go, Sam.
Thank you. I'm here today for 2 reasons. My twin girls, Anna and Ginny. You've heard a lot about Article 5, but I want to tell you a story that you probably don't know and haven't heard. The story of January 16th, 1979, when a plan hatched out of political expediency convinced a majority of major politicians and organizations that fringe theories that fear-mongered about the process were true, and organized them to spread those lies so thoroughly that they gave rise to modern myths that you may have heard repeated today from sources that you might otherwise quite justifiably trust. By way of background, at that time the balanced budget amendment was at the height of its popularity, and it was close to achieving an Article 5 convention. Ronald Reagan supported the process, and the Democrats panicked when Governor Jerry Brown, then seen as a strong primary challenger to Jimmy Carter, also came on board in support. In spite of a Carter administration Department of Justice memorandum that said that the Article 5 convention process is perfectly safe and should be used when you agree with the policy for which it's being called, on that same day that memo was released, there were a string of memos from Senate staffers that panicked and argued and hatched a plan to argue about the process rather than the policy. Now, first you should consider that even a very popular amendment like the Equal Rights Amendment failed in the face of strong opposition on policy, and even a slight dip in the popularity of the Balanced Budget Amendment would have made it impossible, but instead they argued on the process. And I'm going to quote to you from a memo that I don't think has been seen since 1979, where they outlined their plan to, quote, try to coordinate behind-the-scenes campaign to quell state legislatures from urging Congress to call a convention, hold hearings with the aim of demonstrating the risk of calling a convention, and scream. By March, prominent politicians had begun to organize a coalition that would eventually include Common Cause, who opposed the BBA on the left, and the John Birch Society, who opposed it from the right, along with a number of other groups and politicians. In November, they held a hearing with every legal scholar that they could find that was willing to repeat those fringe theories, often outside of their own areas of expertise, as well as other legal scholars who argued primarily about applying the convention process to the BBA, but they had their arguments taken out of context. And through motivated reasoning, I have no doubt that the majority of the people who were behind this coordinated effort actually believed those fringe talking points. If you find these talking points out there and you want to believe them, it's not hard to convince yourself they're true. And through that, they ended up in the popular culture, and you hear them today from people who you should trust on other issues, but they are misguided on this. The fact is the BBA has lost 25% of its Article 5 convention calls in the last 35 years, does not have the level of support it had then. But our policy, the restoring free and fair elections, does have the level of support needed to actually achieve an amendment, and it is the only policy that should, and that is the only policy on which you should base your vote today.
Thank you. Testimony. I did adhere to the 6-minute rule. The panel well over that. I know you submitted testimony. If you'd like to make some comments, go right ahead. But we got to keep the hearing going and stay on schedule.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Lon and Chairman Rush, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Paul Lauenstein. I'm a retired business owner in Massachusetts and a volunteer for We the People Massachusetts, and I'm here today to speak in support of the We the People Act. Corporations and billionaires dominate our political landscape and interfere with the ability of our elected leaders to serve the people. A series of Supreme Court decisions allows these powerful special interests to use their prodigious financial resources to influence members of Congress and manipulate constitutional rights to undermine public policy. Thomas Jefferson understood this. He said, "I hope we shall crush in its birth the aristocracy of our money corporations, which dare already to challenge our government to a trial by strength and bid defiance to the laws of our country." I would like to cite two modern-day examples. One is the court case about cigarette advertising within 1,000 feet of schools and playgrounds, a law that was passed in the Massachusetts legislature. That law was invalidated by the Supreme Court on the grounds that Massachusetts violated the First Amendment speech rights of tobacco companies. That decision calls into question our collective ability to protect our children from dangerous products. And secondly, in the wake of the OPEC crisis, the Public Service Commission of New York enacted a regulation curtailing the advertising of energy products such as gas and electricity. Central Hudson Gas and Electric sued, took it to the Supreme Court, which decided in favor of Central Hudson. Their speech rights trumped the ability of the people of New York to limit advertising of fossil fuel products for the national interest. This decision calls into question our collective ability to reduce carbon emissions that are threatening us all with a climate crisis. It's been over 7 years since Citizens United. Congress has ignored the requests of 19 states, including Massachusetts, to propose the constitutional amendment we urgently need to revive our great experiment in self-government. Therefore, we turn to you, our state legislators, to join the 5 other states that have already called for an amendment proposing convention. Please pass the We the People Act as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you all for your